You have everything you're supposed to want. The job, the relationship, the apartment, the friends, the weekend plans. Your life looks full from the outside, but inside there's a hollowness that's growing, expanding, taking up more space every day. You wake up, and the first feeling isn't gratitude or excitement, it's emptiness. A void that no amount of coffee, scrolling, or keeping busy can fill. And the worst part? You can't explain it. You have no reason to feel this way, which makes the emptiness even more suffocating. So, you do what everyone does. You try to fill it. More work, more achievements, more relationships, more experiences, more distractions, more everything. But the emptiness doesn't shrink, it grows. And the more you try to fill it, the more it expands, like you're pouring water into a bucket with no bottom.
You've been taught that emptiness is a problem to be solved, a gap to be filled, a deficiency that needs something added to it, and the entire world is designed to sell you things that promise to fill it. Success, love, pleasure, purpose, meaning, belonging. But here's what nobody tells you. The emptiness isn't growing because you're missing something. The emptiness is growing because you're doing exactly what you've been told will fix it. And every attempt to fill the void is actually feeding it, making it larger, more insistent, more consuming. There's an old belief buried so deep in our culture that we don't even question it anymore. Emptiness is the absence of something. If you feel empty, it's because you don't have enough. Enough love, enough success, enough purpose, enough meaning, enough validation, enough experiences. This belief makes perfect sense. It's logical, it's intuitive, and it's how we've been trained to think about every problem. Something's missing? Add more. Feel empty? Fill yourself up. And the entire self-improvement industry, the entire economy of meaning is built on this assumption that emptiness is a deficiency problem. But that belief is backwards, and believing it is why you're drowning in a void that keeps expanding no matter how much you add to your life. Because emptiness isn't what's missing from your life. Emptiness is what happens when you've been living a life that isn't actually yours. Your brain is designed to feel empty when there's a gap between who you actually are and who you're pretending to be. When your external life doesn't match your internal truth, your psyche creates a void, not as a problem, but as a signal. The emptiness is your deepest self trying to tell you that you're living someone else's life in your own body. Think about the last time you felt truly full, truly alive, truly present, not distracted happy or achievement satisfied or validation high, actually full. When was it? And if you're honest, it probably wasn't when you were doing what you're supposed to do. It was when you were doing something that felt real, even if it made no sense to anyone else.
Maya spent 5 years in medical school, becoming the doctor her parents always wanted her to be. She did everything right, studied hard, matched at a good residency, started building the respectable career. But the emptiness grew every year. She couldn't explain it. She had purpose. She was helping people. She was successful. Why did she feel like she was disappearing? Because here's what Maya didn't understand until it almost destroyed her. She wasn't living her purpose. She was performing someone else's purpose in her life. And every day she spent being the person she was supposed to be. The gap between her real self and her performed self grew wider. That gap is what we call emptiness. This is the authenticity void. You can't fill it by adding more to your life. You can only fill it by subtracting, removing the layers of performance, expectation, and pretending that are creating the gap between who you are and who you're being. The emptiness isn't because something's missing. It's because something false has been added and is taking up space where your real life should be. And here's where it gets devastating. The things you're using to try to fill the emptiness are often the very things creating it. You chase success to fill the void, but the success you're chasing is someone else's definition, which makes the void deeper. You seek validation to feel full, but performing for validation requires betraying yourself, which creates more emptiness. Every time you make a choice based on what you should do, what looks good, what makes sense to others, what's practical or impressive or acceptable, you're widening the gap between your true self and your performed self. And that gap feels like emptiness, like something's missing, when really something inauthentic has been imposed. Jason felt it in his relationship. He loved his girlfriend, or thought he did, or knew he was supposed to. She checked every box: smart, attractive, successful, compatible on paper. But he felt empty around her. He couldn't explain it, couldn't justify it, couldn't understand why being with someone so perfect felt like slowly erasing himself. Because here's what he eventually realized. He loved who he was supposed to be with her. He loved the version of himself that made sense in that relationship. But that version wasn't him. It was a performance. And performing a relationship, even with someone great, creates a void that no amount of connection can fill, because the connection isn't happening with your actual self. This is the performance paradox. The more you perform being someone, successful, together, happy, purposeful, in love, the emptier you feel. Because performance requires disconnection from your real internal experience. And that disconnection, that split between inner and outer, is exactly what emptiness is. Your brain registers this split as a threat. When your external life and your internal truth are misaligned, your psyche creates discomfort to alert you that something's wrong. But we've been taught to interpret that discomfort as "I need more," when really it's "I'm being less than I am." So what do most people do? They double down on the performance. The emptiness gets interpreted as not having enough, so they perform harder, achieve more, add more relationships, more experiences, more everything. And the void expands because they're feeding the very thing that's creating it, the gap between real and performed.
Rebecca quit her corporate job to travel the world. She'd felt empty for years and decided the problem was her routine, her predictability, her lack of adventure. So she sold everything and spent a year moving through countries, collecting experiences, posting beautiful photos, living the life everyone said would make her feel alive. But the emptiness followed her. Different cities, same void. More experiences, same hollowness. Because she didn't understand that she wasn't running toward aliveness. She was running from the discomfort of admitting that the emptiness wasn't about her external circumstances. It was about the fact that she'd spent a decade building a life based on other people's expectations. And changing locations didn't change that fundamental betrayal of self. This is the external solution trap. We keep trying to solve internal misalignment with external additions. New job, new city, new relationship, new experiences, new achievements. But if the emptiness is coming from the gap between who you are and who you're being, changing what you have doesn't address what you're denying about who you are. And here's what makes it almost impossible to see. Our culture is designed to keep you focused externally. Every message you receive tells you that fulfillment comes from adding more success, more love, more purpose, more experiences, more meaning. Nobody tells you that fulfillment might require subtracting, removing, admitting, and revealing. Because the truth about emptiness is terrifying. Filling it doesn't require getting more. It requires becoming more honest. And honesty about who you actually are, what you actually want, and what your life actually looks like beneath the performance is the one thing most people will do anything to avoid. Daniel felt the emptiness most acutely when he achieved goals. He'd work towards something, a promotion, a fitness milestone, a relationship step. And the moment he got it, instead of satisfaction, there was just more void. He thought this meant he was broken, that achievement didn't work for him, that he was incapable of feeling fulfilled. But the emptiness after achievement wasn't because achievement doesn't work. It was because he was achieving things he didn't actually want. The goals weren't his. They were what success was supposed to look like. And every time he reached one, his psyche would confront him with the truth. You just spent months working toward something that means nothing to you. The void that opens after that realization is enormous. This is the borrowed goals problem. When you're chasing external validation or cultural definitions of success, achievement creates emptiness instead of fulfillment, because reaching the goal forces you to admit it was never yours. The emptiness isn't because you're ungrateful or broken. It's because you just proved to yourself that you're living for an audience instead for your actual desires. So, if the emptiness can't be filled by adding more, if it grows every time you perform instead of being real, if external solutions just deepen internal voids, what's the actual way out? And here's where most people resist, because the answer isn't what you want to hear. The only way out of emptiness is through it. Not around it, not over it, not by filling it. Through it, by stopping the frantic filling and sitting in the void long enough to hear what it's actually trying to tell you about the life you're living and the self you're betraying. Emptiness isn't your enemy. It's your internal alarm system trying to save you from a life that isn't yours. And the reason it keeps growing isn't because you're not adding enough. It's because you're not listening. The void expands to get your attention, to force you to stop performing and start being real about what's actually happening inside you. But sitting in emptiness, actually feeling it without trying to fix it or fill it or distract from it, is the hardest thing you'll ever do. Because when you stop filling the void, you have to face what the void is showing you. That you've been living a life designed to impress, comfort, or satisfy everyone except yourself. Sarah finally stopped running from her emptiness at a breakdown at 32. She'd tried everything: therapy, medication, new relationships, spiritual practices, career changes. Nothing worked. So in exhaustion and desperation, she did the one thing she'd never done. She stopped trying to fix it. She sat with the emptiness and asked it what it wanted. And what came up was devastating. She didn't want the life she'd built. Not the career, not the relationship, not the city, not the identity she'd spent a decade constructing. The emptiness wasn't because something was missing. It was because everything present was wrong. Her entire life was a performance for people whose approval didn't actually matter to her. This is the moment most people can't bear to reach. Because once you sit with the emptiness long enough to hear its message, you can't unhear it. You can't go back to performing ignorance. You can't keep filling the void with distractions once you know what the void is actually saying. This life isn't yours, and every day you live it, you're dying a little more. The only way out of the emptiness is through radical honesty about the gap between who you are and who you've been being. And that honesty requires admitting things you don't want to admit. That you're in the wrong relationship, the wrong career, the wrong life, that you've been performing for approval, that you're terrified of disappointing people, that you don't actually know who you are beneath all the pretending. And here's what makes it even harder. The things you have to admit to fill the void are often the things you've built your entire identity around. You can't just tweak around the edges. You have to question whether the foundations are real. And most people would rather live with growing emptiness than face the possibility that they've been building a life on false foundations. Michael stayed in his marriage for 7 years after the emptiness told him it was over. He knew somewhere deep that he was performing being a husband, but admitting that meant destroying the life they'd built, hurting someone they cared about, facing judgment from everyone who saw them as perfect, and confronting the terrifying question, if I'm not this person in this life, who am I? So he chose emptiness over honesty, and the void grew until it consumed everything: his energy, his presence, his capacity for joy, his ability to connect. By the time he finally faced the truth, he wasn't just empty, he was a shell performing being human, while actual living happened somewhere far away from his performed existence. This is the cost of refusing to face what emptiness is telling you. You don't get to keep your comfortable life and be free of the void. You get to keep performing your life while the emptiness eats you from the inside until there's nothing left but the performance. And you can perform for decades, right up until the moment you can't anymore and everything collapses.
But here's what changes everything. The moment you stop trying to fill the emptiness and start listening to it. The moment you admit the truth it's been screaming at you, something extraordinary happens. The void doesn't disappear immediately, but it stops growing because you finally heard the message. You've acknowledged the unalignment between who you are and who you've been being. And once you acknowledge it, you can start making different choices. Not performing choices, not impressive choices, not comfortable choices, real choices. Choices that close the gap between your internal truth and your external life. Choices that feel terrifying and right simultaneously. Choices that might disappoint everyone except the self you've been betraying. When Sarah finally left the career that looked perfect but felt dead, the emptiness didn't vanish, but for the first time in years, it stopped expanding. Because she'd finally listened to what it was telling her and taken action based on her actual truth instead of her performed identity. The void began to shrink, not because she filled it, but because she removed what was creating it. The life that was never hers and the self you were never meant to be. This is the only path out. Not addition, but subtraction. Not filling, but revealing. Not performing more successfully, but being more honestly. And yes, this means facing everything you've been using the performance to avoid. Judgment, disappointment, uncertainty, the terror of not knowing who you are when you stop being who you're supposed to be.
But here's the truth your emptiness is trying to tell you. You're already facing those things. The performance isn't protecting you from fear and judgment and uncertainty. It's creating a different kind of death, a slow erasure where you get to keep your external life while your internal life becomes an expanding black hole. The emptiness is your psyche choosing life. It's refusing to let you perform your way through existence without ever actually existing. It's the part of you that won't be silenced, that keeps growing louder and more insistent until you finally listen, until you finally choose being real over being impressive. So if you're feeling empty, if the void keeps growing no matter what you add to your life, if nothing fills the hollowness anymore, it's not because you're broken or ungrateful or incapable of being happy. It's because you're living a life that isn't yours, being someone you're not, and your deepest self is creating a void to get your attention. And the only way out is to stop filling and start listening, to sit with the emptiness long enough to hear what it's telling you about the gap between who you are and who you've been being, to admit the truths you don't want to admit about what's false in your life, to make the terrifying choices that close the gap between your performed self and your real self. You can keep trying to fill the void with more success, more relationships, more experiences, more achievements, more everything. And you can do that for years, maybe decades, building an increasingly impressive external life, while your internal life becomes an expanding black hole. But here's what will save you. The emptiness isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. It's your internal alarm system refusing to let you sleepwalk through a performed life. And the moment you stop fighting it and start listening to it, the moment you choose being real over being impressive, the void stops growing. Not because you filled it, but because you finally removed what was creating it, the life that was never yours and the self you were never meant to be. The emptiness will lead you home, but only if you stop running from it and start letting it show you the way back to whoever you were before you learned to be what everyone else needed you to be.